Welcome to the Goodyear Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. We're excited to have you be a part of this important public process. Tonight, you will have the opportunity to address the commission on both non-agenda and agenda items. The agendas and speaker request cards are located in the back of the council chambers. You must fill out a speaker request card in order to address the commission. Please hand in your completed card to a city staff member. You may check the "I do not wish to speak" option on the card. This allows you to still voice your opinion on an item on the record without having to speak. In accordance with the Americans with Disabilities Act, please contact a staff member if you need any assistance. Public comment on a non-agenda item will take place during the citizen comment portion of the evening. These are items that don't appear on tonight's formal agenda. The commission secretary will call your name when it's time for you to speak. At that time, please approach the podium and tell us your name for the record. You'll have a maximum of 3 minutes. The timer is on the screens visible from the podium. Note that you may also choose not to speak if other speakers before you have said what you wanted to say. Shouting, cheering, and loud noises will not be tolerated, and violators may be removed for disrupting the meeting. Goodyear Planning and Zoning Commission meetings stream live on YouTube and online at goodyearaz.gov. Follow the city's social media pages so you don't miss out on all that's happening in Goodyear. Thank you for coming to this meeting and being an active part of your city. And remember, it's a great time to be in Goodyear.
Hello, I am loud. The Goodyear Planning and Zoning Commission meeting for March the 13th, 2024 is now called to order. Will you all join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Good evening, Madam Secretary. Will you please note the roll?
Of course. Commissioner Smith is present. Commissioner Booth is present. Commissioner Hegedus is present. Commissioner Wang is present. Vice Chairman Zambito is present. Chairman Clymer is present. Commissioner Kish is absent. We have a quorum. Is there a motion and a second to excuse Commissioner Kish from the meeting? I have a motion from Commissioner Booth and a second from Commissioner Hegedus. Please enter your vote.
Aye.
Still giving you trouble? Okay. All right, motion passes.
Okay, the first item is to approve the draft minutes. Will the Secretary please read the recommendation?
Absolutely. Approve the draft minutes of the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting held on February 14th, 2024. Is there a motion and a second for the staff recommendation? I have a motion from Commissioner Hegedus and a second from Commissioner Smith. Please enter your vote. And motion passes.
Now's the time for citizens who would like to address the Planning and Zoning Commission for any non-agenda items. Are there any speaker cards?
I've not received any.
Anyone in the audience? I'm looking. I see 2 people out there, and one is an employee. So anyone want to speak? Okay. All right, moving on. This is now an opportunity for commission members to disclose any ex parte communication they may have had prior to this meeting on any item scheduled for discussion on the agenda. Ex parte communication is any outside communication commissioners may have had regarding items on tonight's agenda. Anyone?
No.
Okay, thank you. The only item on the agenda tonight is a presentation and discussion of the use permit and special use permit process. Planning Manager Christian Williams will present. Hello, Christian, and congratulations on your new title.
Thank you. I'm very excited about it.
Okay.
And I get to have my first commission position.
Okay.
Thank you. My name is Christian Williams. I'm the planning manager, and thank you for having me. And today we're going to begin a conversation on updates to the zoning ordinance regarding certain use permits, special use permits, and standards for approval. The overreaching aim is to streamline the process and save time, proactively enhancing efficiencies. This entails exploring administrative solutions and staff level adjustments within policy frameworks, thus minimizing the need for commission and council involvement. Numerous cities are also adopting similar approaches and transitioning towards administrative streamlining measures. So by the end of tonight's conversation, the goal will be to create some additional certainty, conditions, and clarity surrounding those uses and giving staff some direction on how you'd like us to proceed. So touching on the strategic action plan, as some of you are well aware, the council has adopted the FY 25-27 strategic action plan. Modernizing our zoning codes and evaluating how to provide certainty, conditions, and clarity surrounding those certain uses aligns with that plan, the guiding principles and goals. Specifically within economic vitality, that of fostering business investment through streamlined processes and removing the time it takes to go through the use permit and special use process and implementing consistent guidelines. The customers can save time and make better informed decisions when considering to open a business with the community. Additionally, in creating conditions and clarity for where certain specific uses may be located, we're contributing to a safe and vibrant community, and we can support a well-maintained and sustainable community for our residents. So that is part of those goals as well. So for tonight's discussion, the uses that we will be discussing are the special use of mini storage and recreational vehicle storage. We'll be discussing service stations or gas stations, as well as convenience stores, car washes, drive-in and drive-through restaurants, and auto repair facilities is a use that is permitted, but we'd like to have some additional discussions. The photo on the right is an example of a new development that was approved within Goodyear and was a topic of discussion, particularly by council when it went up for entitlement. Particularly, they made some comments about the number of drive-throughs and convenience uses on one site in proximity to residential. On the last slide of this presentation, I will go into the next steps that will happen after this work session I have with y'all today, and that will also talk about the public hearing process and what that looks like. If a future zoning ordinance text amendment addresses some of the common stipulations attached to the uses and special use permits that you often will see, this will greatly reduce the amount of items that will be coming before you as well as the city council, and will speed up the time for our customers to open business here. All right, so we'll be discussing the items related to the uses on separation requirements between two uses that are the same, limits on over-concentration of certain types of uses, proximity to residential and mitigation measures that might be considered, and some design elements where they are located next to arterial roads, as well as the size limits within commercial centers that might help us preserve some additional commercial opportunities. So we'll start with the first use, which is a special use. So storage is a use that currently is permitted in C1, like neighborhood commercial, C2 general commercial, I1 light industrial, and I2 general industrial with a special use permit. There are also some inconsistencies within the zoning ordinance language and terminology that will be cleaned up with this process. The special use permit process does afford developers to deviate from setback standards and other zoning criteria. There is no additional guidance on the placement or separation of this use within our zoning ordinance or design guidelines. And from a staff observation perspective, this land use is a very popular use that is proposed to staff on a frequent basis. And staff has expressed concerns regarding the amount of storage that could consume our limited commercial corners if there is no regulations that exist. So if this process went away with no regulation, that's a concern we would have. Through utilizing the special use permit process and negotiations, staff has encouraged the developer and community to leave some of our larger commercial centers and some of the parcels available for other commercial uses, to consider locating storage to industrial areas for those larger uses, and to enhance the design of buildings to not have extensive unscreened roll-up doors and floating faux illuminated garage doors hovering over storage buildings. We've also made note of some council conversations surrounding the Pueblo Verde storage and the Abernathy Palm Valley storage cases, Pueblo Verde Storage on Cerebral and Yuma. Some good discussion about design there. And then the Abernathy one, which was an infill project within Palm Valley at Litchfield and McDowell. However, formal direction is needed if the special use permit process is removed. And the image on the screen is actually a storage unit that is not within Goodyear, but it's completely surrounded within Goodyear. It takes up a very large commercial area, and as you can see, there's the faux floating doors and unscreened storage in the yards. So that's an example of some of our concerns. So staff's recommendation is that if the special use permit is removed, storage be permitted within C1 and C2 on a maximum of 7.5 acres, not to exceed 50% of a contiguous commercial site. Storage not be located within 300 feet of an arterial to arterial intersection. If somebody wanted to do that, that should go through the use permit process. And it should not exceed 500 feet of arterial frontage. The goal there is to preserve the hard corner, since these buildings tend to be a lot taller, for that future commercial opportunity. This recommendation, again, it attempts to preserve some commercial opportunity. Sorry about that. To avoid clustering of storage units, storage would not be able to locate within 1,500 feet of another storage unit. No outdoor RV storage would be permitted within the commercial centers. Only indoor storage would be permitted. In addition, storage would need to adhere to those design guidelines that you see on similar projects that you've seen recently, like the one at Litchfield and Van Buren, or the Pueblo Verde storage case that I referenced earlier. If it's adjacent to residentially zoned areas, it would need to be they need to have at least a 20-foot landscape buffer on the storage side. Now, if the residential area has a built-in big old buffer, then they would follow the typical C2, C1 setbacks. So to highlight staff's recommendation, I said a lot right there. We would allow for storage in C1, C2, maximum of 7.5 acres, or 50%, whichever is the least, on the site. Not located within 300 feet of an arterial to arterial intersection, that would require a use permit. Again, the goal would be to preserve commercial centers for additional opportunities. And then no outdoor RV storage would be permitted. Indoor RV storage would be permitted, along with the enhanced guidelines. And I'll make another note, if it is within 500 feet of residential, there would be hours of operation restrictions. In the industrial zones, outdoor storage would be permitted if screened from off-site view. There would be no size restrictions, and that would hopefully encourage larger storage developments to locate in industrial areas, which we have a lot of industrial land. It would also be similar design standards and hours of operation requirements if within 500 feet of residential. And the image here is an example of a storage unit in Goodyear that is located in an industrial area and does not occupy a lot of arterial frontage. I apologize, the image on the previous screen was the Pueblo Verde storage example, where you can see that there is a setback from the arterial corner to provide that corner some additional opportunities. Standards we've already implemented in some regard. This is where I pause, take a breath, and open it up for y'all's discussion.
I see Maria wants to say something.
Red is on.
There you go.
Okay. So, Christian, when you talk about the one that we've already done, the Pueblo Verde, that would be something we would be looking for as a, not so to speak standard, but we wouldn't be reviewing it, and it would happen that way seamlessly. You guys would make sure they meet the standards. I like that. That's a positive to me. I do notice that particular instance, they were really close to the homes. I don't know if I missed that meeting or if it was before I was on the commission. And you talked about the 20-foot setback. How about a height requirement when it's that close?
The C2 height requirements would still kick in. So if you're adjacent to residential, so the 20-foot is a landscape setback. If the building height, there's rules in the zoning ordinance that say if you're a C2 use, if you're X amount of feet, if you're over 20 feet, between 20 and 30, your separation from residential is this. If you're above 30, your separation increases based on 1 foot per every foot. So those would still apply. You would not get call it a 3-story, 40-foot storage building 20 feet from residential. You'd have the 20-foot landscape buffer, and the building would still need to follow the C2 standards.
So it's still going to follow the same that we already have, and like that instance of Pueblo Verde, they had shorter storage buildings, I thought, at the back with the larger building at the front, so it's not as obtrusive on our residents.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I think this is excellent in the way that we're doing it, as other cities are also. Good or bad in other people's minds, we're probably still in the top 10 in the United States for growth. And growth comes a lot of issues that can clog up the system. And if we can streamline those, I think it's all for the better.
Any other discussion?
Do you think that it would be frequent that we would have people requesting a deviation? Or if this is passed, then ideally the developers won't push to move outside. They just want to keep it streamlined and easy, and they'll try to meet as much as possible.
So similar to any other commercial use, if we approve this, there is no deviation process.
Okay.
The process for deviation, because if you're looking at individual lots and rezoning one lot for one deviation, that gets like to the point of spot zoning. But let's say somebody had a very unique master planned product in a mixed use center that they wanted to do a PAD for. That's where we'd look at if there's different standards that apply. This is really applying to, you have a C2 site, if you or a C1 site and you want to do storage, or you have an I1 site or an I2 site and you want to do storage. Here are the rules. If you're this close to residential, this is how far back you need to go, etc. And where should you locate it on that site?
Okay, good.
Thank you.
Any others? All right.
Here we go. So we've approved quite a few storage facilities in the last couple of years. I'm just curious to know, what's the saturation point? I mean, obviously there's a need, or we wouldn't have all of these rezones and popping up all over. Do you know?
That's really a market question. I mean, there's varying opinions on whether the market is oversaturated or not. But I will say with this zoning provision, where there is some protections for that is the separation requirement. If this were to be approved, this would discourage a clustering of storage in one location because you have that 1,500-foot separation from storage.
Which still seems pretty close.
It is, but it does push you, I believe, like a quarter mile away. And then we do have the provisions about the maximum acreage and not consuming an entire center with storage. So it will still be a market decision, but it does provide some protections that if we have 4 commercial corners at one arterial intersection, it's not going to all be all 4 corners storage in all 80 acres of storage.
Okay.
It feels like it's going to provide us some protection from, we just want to do a bunch of storage facilities or any one of the other items. We just want to mass them all here, and it allows staff to take control of that and keeps it from everybody asking for something special and doesn't put us in the position of having to push
The
back.
1,500 feet seems still close to me. I mean, that's the minimum requirement, and
in Goodyear, I would say typically you're not going to have every quarter mile be a commercial zone. It is very common that our commercial zones fall at hard intersections. So when you're talking about 1,500 feet, you're basically almost saying 1 per center unless you go another quarter mile. If we have there's some areas on McDowell Road where you have, commercial for an entire mile. In theory, you could have four storage there, but there would be other commercial opportunities in between.
right, thank you.
Plus, we're trying to push them back from the intersection so they wouldn't be as obtrusive to the view.
Correct.
Kind of like the one we looked at up there at Bullard, where the Buc-ee's was. It was way down the street there. That would be ideal. We don't see it every day when we drive by.
Storage can be a great infill. When you have a commercial site that has some different topography or shapes, and let's say you did there's one near my house. You have a grocery store in the front, and the back of that center is really big and pretty far from traffic, and storage was a great infill site buffered back there. They have a little store presence on the main strip, and all the storage is tucked in an L behind the building. So this would encourage something like that, where you have a hard-to-fill commercial site. Great questions. Any more? Well, we don't have to, if you think of something later, we can always come back, so this is great. All right. So the next one is gas stations. Gas stations are permitted with a use permit in C1 and C2 zones. The zoning ordinance and design guidelines discourage this use on hard corners, but provides flexibility when design enhancements occur. There's also guidance to consider reverse orienting the canopies to be located at the rear of the retail building, which generally has not been the chosen option here in Goodyear to date by the development community. From a staff observation perspective, the city does not currently have a clustering of gas stations on one corner, in part due to the use of the special use permit, but this has occurred in our neighboring cities. Thus, the city would seek to prevent this from occurring in the future if we opt to remove this process. If we move away from the special use permit, policies should be considered for how a by right allowance would impact the look and feel of the city. And also, the definition of convenience store would also need to be addressed. And we've made some notes of some particular council conversations and P&Z conversations of when gas stations were approved. A couple examples that we looked to in drafting some draft policy would be the Quick Trip that y'all approved in Canyon Trails off 173rd and Yuma Road. In the image here, this shows a neighboring community that has three gas stations on the corner of their arterial to arterial intersections, as well as a gas station that what they could look like if there's no corner enhancements, what our main intersections could look like if there's no corner enhancement opportunities. So staff's recommendation would be that if a use permit process is removed, gas stations would be permitted in C1 and C2 districts. Convenience stores or small square retail would be allowed with them. And if they are not reverse-oriented and within 300 feet of a planned intersection, they would be required to provide a plaza. The use must be located 250 feet from residential or separated by a public roadway, canal, or railroad from residential. The use would be allowed with a large retailer that's over 50,000 square feet. So think of a Walmart or Safeway that wanted a gas station. They could have one as an accessory and not be in conflict with distance requirements. No more than one gas station would be permitted within a quarter mile of an arterial to arterial intersection. And staff would clarify that electric vehicle charging is permitted at a gas station. And then no separate diesel pumps in commercial districts or truck stops in commercial districts. The pictures here are an example of the Circle K at McDowell and Pebble Creek with that plaza feature. And this is an example of a neighboring city that has a reverse-oriented canopy, just for examples of what the options would be. Staff would also recommend that if the use permit process is removed, gas stations would be permitted in I1 and I2 districts with design enhancements and clustering requirements, similar to the ones in C1 and C2. Separate diesel pumping would be a use permit process in I1 and permitted by right in I2 with truck facilities. And the pictures here are an example of a gas station with separate diesel pumping and some truck parking facilities in a neighboring city. Discussion time.
So when you mentioned quite a few criterion that we'd like to set up. And from what we have seen, it looks like those are things we work towards today, but they're not necessarily today guaranteed. It's still a negotiation through the process, coming through planning after that, and then council. If this goes through with the suggested edits and requirements, then it would be that way unless, and even then, they can't deviate.
Correct.
Again. Okay.
Correct.
I like the requirements. Is there a concern that we can't get to having it where it's reverse oriented so that they have not necessarily the storefront, but the building first and the station behind it? I know you say we asked for the plaza. Can we make that more ominous so that they might be more encouraged to do the other one?
So the encouragement would be that if it's reverse oriented, they don't need to do the plaza. Because the design guidelines encourage reverse orienting. So if they opt to not do that, this is stating, okay, you've opted not to do that, you will do the plaza.
And I understand that, but it was also indicated that they don't frequently look to do that. They just go ahead and build the plaza, which is a visual benefit to us. But since they're not even trying the alternate, are we not, maybe is there a way to make the plaza more ominous for them? Like, you have to do even more to encourage them more the other direction.
From a staff perspective, we would still always encourage them to do the reverse orienting. Even though there's the options now, we'd still encourage it. And then we set up the minimum standards for the plaza now.
Okay, do we need to reconsider those standards? I guess that's something for are we even thinking we might be interested in orienting, having the shop being the thing in the front with potentially decorated buildings and then the gas pumps surrounded by the shop so it's not visual to the street side? Or do we not care? I mean, this is something we have to kind of decide if we want more.
I could offer this too. There are times when you may not want a reverse orient. There's great times when it works, especially in a very comprehensive, cohesive center where the traffic's driving into the center. It makes a lot of sense there. Times where you may not want to do that is when it is a little closer to residential. Again, we're setting that minimum, but if there's not residential to block it, now you're putting all the active traffic, the active noise on the resident side. So there are times when we may not want to encourage that.
And I don't know how hard we would come down on something like that, because you got a developer who thinks he wants to do this, and make money, and they may not think that having it in the back is going to be visual enough for them to go draw traffic. Obviously, you want to show that this is your business. Just my thought there, that you sit in the back and you don't see those pumps, and you drive by without looking at signage, I suppose. I'm just, off the top of my head, what would a developer say back to you then? If I don't have to do that, I don't really want to in this case, or in that case.
I was just looking at it as an opportunity, and I respect what you said, Christian, that maybe we wouldn't want that, because definitely I agree, we don't want it closer to the residents. That's the noisier part of the business as opposed to the back of a quiet building. But if the alternative were they want to orient it that way, or they have the opportunity to orient it that way, maybe if the opposite were true, yeah, we already have them do the little plaza at the corner, but that's only if they're at the corner. What if they're mid-block? They don't have to do a plaza then, do they?
If they're further than 300 feet from an intersection, they would not do the plaza.
So there's really no encouragement to even try the alternative. They still would have their opportunity for signage. I know where most of the gas stations are, even where they're not corner located. So it's an opportunity for us to say we want more enhancement if you're at the corner, or we can just leave it the way it is. I mean, the team does a great job of putting them together. It's just an opportunity for us to ask for more, because the discussions with the developers are still going to take place. They're still, no matter what we set up for our criteria, and this is what we want, they're still going to push back over the next few months. So it may go back to where it was. But my thought is, if we don't ask for something, they could always push for less anyway. So,
Well, you'd be discussing this with council even before you really go through with it, so you might make note of that what Marie has come up with, and
Can definitely do that.
suggest that.
and will we have the chance to look at it again when it's the final thing, or so this is just like preliminary,
Yeah.
throwing ideas around, so.
I'm trying to think, is there any reverse-oriented gas stations in Goodyear right now?
Not in Goodyear, no.
Can you think of?
I'm worried about the traffic flow of that, coming in and out of a gas station on a corner, because that's what we have here. I can visualize. How would the flow be different?
They would enter the center, and so right now we always have decel lane requirements and distances from intersections where you can enter a site. So in a reverse oriented, for example, the one that's by my house, you pass the gas station, you continue into the center, you're on the main drive of the center, and then when you're in the main center, you look back and you see the pumps, the car wash. They have like an L-shaped car wash. It's actually this here. So they have the car wash tunnel, gas station, mini mart. It's kind of like an L shape. So you would pass the center, turn in, and then you go back into like a enclosed pad. Almost kind of like the Panera Bread, that's right at Pebble Creek and McDowell. You know, you enter that center and the buildings are L reverse oriented. That's kind of like how it is. So it would be the same kind of traffic circulation.
It was just a thought to throw it out there. I mean, we may have some of the other ones that we would look for something a little more.
All right, any other comments? Great comments, by the way. All right. So car washes require a use permit, but no specific criteria and no specific distance separation requirements exist today. From a staff observation perspective, staff has created standards for developments within the GSQ Regional Center rezoning, which we believe also mitigated some of those concerns related to noise and queuing and proximity to sensitive uses. We've also made note of commission and council conversations related to the proposed car wash on McDowell Road and Bullard Avenue, which did not come to fruition, as well as the Sedea commercial car wash, which was the last car wash I believe you all heard about over there in Sedea. So lots of comments and complimentary things that help staff kind of understand what the policy perspective might be. The photo on the left is in a neighboring city. That is a car wash that might as well be in the middle of a residential neighborhood. The car wash on the right is a car wash in Goodyear that the noise from that tunnel is in close proximity to hotels and restaurants. Staff's recommendation would be that if the use permit process is removed, they be allowed within C2, so long as they are not located within 300 feet of an arterial-to-arterial intersection or within 300 feet of a hotel, motel, or restaurant patio. The use would need to be 300 feet from residential uses or separated by a public road, canal, railroad. The tunnel shall be screened. The conditions seek to encourage those uses to locate in larger centers and in areas that can accommodate those noise type of factors. There would also be stipulations that are very common to some of the similar car washes you've seen regarding decibel levels leaving the property. Queuing would be a requirement, and they would also be permitted as an accessory to a gas station if they're for like a single tunnel. So if you think about some of the older gas stations that used to be developed where it's just, I got gas, gonna quickly get a car wash, not the ones where there's 30 people going to get a car wash at the same time, it'd be permitted as an accessory to that. And the image below is an example of a car wash in Goodyear that more aligns with the standards that we're proposing here today. Happy to discuss.
If we were talking about that single tunnel being an accessory, does it have separate rules? The rules wouldn't be necessarily as stringent?
Happy to hear any of your feedback on that.
I think if it's the noise, my understanding was the noise of the one there on Australia was coming out of the tunnel. I don't see why you wouldn't want the same. I think we should have at least the same setback from residential at the very least. I would
Great
think the
comments.
hotels might have a concern with that, but if there's no restaurant that has a musical venue or an outdoor seating, that may not be an issue there. But I don't see why you wouldn't want the same requirement, because it was the idea of what was going through the tunnel that was making the noise.
And a great point, one thing to point out with that is the car wash would be accessory to a gas station, and gas stations have a setback of 250 feet from residential. So we could look, I'll definitely take a look at the noise as well.
I mean, if they weren't, are you talking about the pumps or the station itself have 250?
The property.
The property
The gas station
itself.
property.
So it would make it more stringent if they decide to put the tunnel on there.
Yeah, I'll take a look at that,
Okay.
definitely. Great comment, great comment.
Because maybe if somebody's coming in, they just want to add it, they wouldn't have enough room to add it unless they already have that setback.
Correct.
Okay, sorry about that. Did I interrupt somebody? I'm sorry.
Is this picture on the bottom right, that's not in Goodyear, right? Because that's right in the middle.
No, that is
of
not in
residential,
Goodyear.
too. We definitely don't
One
want
on the
that.
right's in a neighboring city, and the one on the left is actually in Goodyear, where there's a pretty good separation buffer from residential, and another business that was able to fit between that to buffer that.
And we limit the hours on the car washes too, correct?
We do not necessarily know.
No?
Well, that's a condition that has come up in the use permit process.
Because even at that one on left that is in Goodyear, if I'm in those homes, you know, and it's spring and you got the windows open at night, I'm not going to want to hear the vacuums going or, you know, the car wash going at night.
It's an excellent condition to consider, yeah.
Because right now, we wouldn't, the way it is now, we wouldn't have that control once this is approved.
Correct,
I think we
absolutely
need to
correct.
consider that.
Yeah,
I mean, the one up there by the hotel off of Estrella, I know they close, so I never would have thought of that. Good point, I wouldn't have thought of that, because they close. I just assumed they all did.
it's a great discussion, great. Any other thoughts or comments?
No, I think you guys have really good control, the one that you did right here on Pebble Creek with the reverse building, and that's absolutely stunning. Very unobtrusive.
Awesome. Giving me great notes, doing my job for me. Awesome. All right. Drive-throughs. Drive-throughs are allowed in C1 and C2 with a use permit when they are closer than 500 feet to residential, and they are allowed by right when they are further than 500 feet from residential. And that was a recent change that you all made not that long ago. The zoning ordinance discourages the convenience uses on hard corners, similar to gas stations without corner enhancements being made. From a staff observation perspective, during the Estrella Commons rezone case, policy direction occurred related to the rezoning of a large commercial center to multifamily to have several drive-throughs and a gas station as the remnant commercial properties. As a result, staff has worked in particular on two developments within zoning cases, Ballpark Village North, that's at the northeast corner of Yuma and Estrella Parkway, and the GSQ Regional Center on drive-through standards to incentivize more retail space, fewer standalone drive-throughs, and encourage end cap drive-throughs, which can bring some additional retail opportunity, as opposed, and also create some pedestrian connectivity and walkability elements, especially when they're in close proximity to residential. We've also made note of some conversations about the Sedea commercial case that you all heard recently, where there was end cap drive-throughs in that center to allow some additional retail opportunity, and as well as some comments that were made during the McDonald's rezone cases. So the photos in this example are of standalone drive-throughs. One is a popular one on Estrella and Roosevelt Street. The example photo on the bottom is that Estrella Commons case where it is 4 standalone drive-throughs and a gas station for the entire commercial center. Staff also recommends that if the use permit is removed, the use be allowed in C1 and C2. And apologize, I want to make a note. The recommendation would be that the drive-through would be located, the lane and the building would be located more than at least 250 feet from residentially zoned properties. Staff's recommendation is also that if the process is removed, that in C1 and C2, we would make drive-throughs a permitted use. Apologize, let me go back to this slide. The recommendation would also be that we would, sorry about that, sorry. We'd make drive-throughs permitted use when they're located at least 250 feet away from residential. The density of standalone drive-throughs would be limited to 1 standalone drive-through for every 5 acres of a commercial center. So by way of example, if you have a 10-acre commercial center, that would allow you 2 standalone drive-throughs. And if drive-throughs are located at a corner of an intersection, it would require, they would be required to do the plaza or a patio facing the intersection. The photo on the upper left again, that is that Estrella Commons case, which has 4 drive-throughs on a 10-acre site and a gas station. And the photo on the bottom right is an example in a neighboring city of what that looks like from a streetscape perspective. As an example of what Estrella Commons would have looked like if this policy was in place, is you would have 2 standalone drive-throughs potentially and 2 additional pads for other opportunities. In addition, in C1, C2, we would create a new category of drive-through for end caps on retail buildings, which would be buildings that have space for 3 or more tenants. To allow for flexibility, end cap drive-throughs would not have a density cap that would incentivize the use of an end cap drive-through as opposed to a standalone drive-through. End cap drive-throughs also tend to be oriented differently, and they have a different level typically of user and volume that goes through them. So the image on that upper right is an example of an end cap drive-through in Goodyear at Estrella Parkway in Van Buren. And there's another example on the bottom right of another end cap drive-through in Goodyear, and those brought with them some other retail opportunities. If they were located with the corner, they would also be required to do the corner enhancements or plaza. Discussion.
Christian, so I have understanding, the McDonald's at Saraval and Yuma, was that 250 feet setback?
That was not 250
So
feet setback.
if we make these changes and they go all the way through, that would not be a use that would come on a site like that.
That is correct.
And what would be the distance? I know you said 250 feet. Is it the distance from the drive-through to the house or the drive-through to the property line?
Drive-through lane or drive-through building to the residential property.
Okay. And the ones like that, the Dunkin' Donuts, I drive by there all the time. I didn't even realize it was a drive-through. I think that is the coolest orientation. I was aware of the one off of Roosevelt there because we've shopped in both of them, but I just didn't pay that much attention to this one. It's so well done. The way it's oriented, you couldn't even tell just driving by. How far is that one? I can see the residential behind it. How far is it from the residential?
Dunkin' Donuts, they would need to have gotten a little bit more creative to make the distance work, but they're pretty close.
So even they're tight?
Yeah.
Okay.
The McDonald's that we approved some time ago on Indian School, just north of Pebble Creek. I forget, how far is that now?
I believe that's pretty close to the 250
Yeah, that's what I
feet.
thought. Okay, so it's, I assume it's going in one of these days, but it's up to the developer, but
And didn't that have another building between it and, there was another pad? to
there
the
was a
east?
Correct.
storage unit, right?
And there was another
There's another-
restaurant or retail pad. So what this code also does is encourage a gap big enough between the building of the drive-through and the residential to allow for another use to also mitigate some of those concerns.
So if we move forward and this gets approved as we've proposed it, the one that Chairman Clymer is saying, they wouldn't be able to put a drive-through on that pad or propose it. It'd be closer, right, to the residents.
The
You know where the McDonald's is, and we talk about the restaurant pad
Yes.
between the homes?
Yes.
So that would preclude them from proposing.
That would preclude them from coming back with a use permit for another drive-through. They would be allowed two in that center, but that second one would not be able to locate there if they opted to remove the storage, for example.
But it could be a sit-down restaurant without a drive-through.
Could be a nail salon, could be a
Yeah.
barber shop,
Okay.
but not a drive-through.
All right.
All right. An auto repair is a use permitted in C1 and C2, I1 and I2. No use permit, no special use permit. However, convenience trends have emerged with drive-up services, and we often have these facilities operate with open garage doors and effectively operating drive-through services. From a staff observation perspective, while in large centers this has not been a large concern, commercial centers have been reducing in size to accommodate residential uses, as you're all well aware, in the rear. So this is a use staff would like to provide further certainty for residents while providing clarity for the developers. The image that you see in this is an auto repair providing outdoor services, which causes queuing to back up, and also businesses that operate with their garage doors open in close proximity to residential, which can be loud. Based on the way these uses operate, staff would keep the existing industrial standards and would allow these uses to be permitted in C2 so long as they are located 250 feet away from residential or separated by a public roadway, canal, or railroad from residential. The proposal adds screening requirements and garage facing requirements, and if there's an outdoor queuing component, queuing would need to be provided. Drive-through components would need to be located at least 250 feet from residential. In the photo here, you see a auto repair facility that has a great buffer of a canal and a park from residential. Happy to discuss.
Yes, I think that's very good, because we have several, but you and I talked in the meeting about that. The people are lining up at a tire dealership to try to either get air or tire inspections or whatever, and they can have quite a long queue, and they have those doors open all the time. It's not right at next door to a neighborhood, but yet, I didn't think the look was all that great.
Yeah, and it affects the traffic too.
Well, can I ask that? So since it sounds like some of the thought in including the repair, the auto shops, because they're basically functioning like a drive-through. So in the drive-through section, you were talking about clustering and like limiting number. Is there a way to still limit number of drive-through operations, even if one is a food and one is auto? Because if you're going to limit the number of drive-through restaurants per acre or per pad because of the traffic in the backup, like this tire shop is over by my house, and then there's also Chick-fil-A on the same property, and like that intersection and that parking lot are impossible to drive because all of the entrances and exits are blocked by those, and those are not two restaurants, but the queue, the way it was not planned out and mapped out, it's I hate it. I avoid that intersection because of that specifically. So is there a way to have language or to consider not the use of the building, but the function of it, since they're both drive-throughs?
They're different uses, so this doesn't contemplate that. However, what this does give staff teeth to do is evaluate the very thing you're talking about. When we're talking about you actually have a queuing requirement now that you need to follow, how are you laying out your site? What does the site planning process look like for that? And determining if the site proposal that you're choosing to do works with our standards. So it gives us the teeth to actually do some enforcement and making sure that cohesive centers like this actually line out well.
So instead of lining up on the access road, they potentially may have their own drive aisle like a drive-through restaurant might.
This would
for
require,
that
if you want to
purpose.
provide a drive-up, drive-through service, you need to provide the queuing requirements or provide a traffic study
And screening for it.
and screening.
So we don't have to see the cars all lined up. Or if we're the cars lined up like we have been, no one has to see us there.
Excellent point.
And you talked about orientation of the building. I've never lived close enough to one to understand the amount of noise, but I can just picture having had the tires done with all the guns moving and pulling the bolts in and out. How would they, since the doors are open, how are they going to prevent being obtrusive or being invasive on the neighbors? How do they do that?
What this seeks to do is really address the orientation. We've had some requests for this use come in next to residential, and some of the new models are you drive in, you get your car worked on, you drive out and through. So you have double sides of doors, and there's nothing in our code that really we encourage and we try to work with our customer, but nothing that gives us the teeth to say, no, you can't orient those open doors towards residential. This gives us some more teeth with the orientation of how that's laid out, and some, at least a minimum of a 6-foot wall to help with some of that noise and visual into the shop, which doesn't exist today.
Yeah. Okay, I like that. More control.
And certainty for the customer. Any other discussions on that one? Well, as stated at the beginning of our conversation, the goal will be to bring forward a zoning ordinance text amendment, which brings that certainty to nearby residents, clarity for the development community, and the conditions by which these will be approved. So the next steps would include March 18th and 25th, we'll be having council work sessions. This presentation will be broken into 2 pieces. Thank you for letting me run it with you all and get your feedback. This has been really helpful to the team here. We'll then go to draft the zoning ordinance text amendment itself. And then following that, there will be public hearing scheduled with y'all, Planning and Zoning Commission, and then a public hearing before the City Council, assuming all of these steps occur to get it to approval. Any questions about anything you heard today? Other comments?
So you mentioned at the beginning, and for just one final thought, it sets requirements in place that the developers can't deviate from. They can't ask for a variance. It's just, this is how you have to do it. unless they do a PAD. Express a little bit the benefits to the residents when we do it this way, because if I'm understanding, it also prevents them from having at least the chance to vocalize concerns about something going on a property next to them.
Correct. This provides you certainty, I mean, as a resident who backs to a dirt lot, and that lot's been a dirt lot for years, and you don't know if there's going to be a public hearing for a use permit for any of these uses, this provides you certainty that this dirt lot may have those uses, but there are minimum standards, minimum distances, and minimum provisions adjacent to your property. So it helps you make a more informed decision about the purchase of your property and also some of the uncertainty about what might go behind your property. So it does provide that. It also provides developers with, if they have a large site, it provides them with some certainty about what uses can go there, but it hopefully encourages them to be a little bit more thoughtful about when they're making those sales and transactions, where they decide to put those ultimate uses.
So by doing some of these changes, adding I-1 and I-2 will hopefully encourage them to consider moving into other additional locations.
Correct. So we, again, especially with storage, if you want to do a very, very large facility as opposed to occupying an entire 10-acre commercial site, it might encourage you to, it would save you time to go to the I-1, I-2, where you could build a very large facility there. Also, as it relates to the drive-throughs, we've added some additional benefits that for these end caps, those don't have the density requirements. So it gives you a little bit more creativity that if you want that third and fourth drive-through, if you provide a little bit more retail in the center, which is a benefit, I believe, to our residents as they've expressed, then you have that opportunity to still get those extra retail opportunities for drive-through users and non-drive-through users.
Thanks, Christian. I'm really excited about some of the different things you guys have done recently, and to see it codified would be nice.
It's y'all's feedback, honestly, that has helped to craft this. If it wasn't for the dialogue that we consistently have, hearing your concerns when these cases come to us, and the things you want us to take a look at, this wouldn't have been written. So it was really written by your feedback along the way.
Thank you. Great presentation, great discussion. Thank you. Are there any staff communications?
Thank you, Chairman, members of the commission. You already mentioned it, but I did want to formally point out that Christian Williams has accepted the position of planning manager permanently. And yes, congratulations, Christian. Thank you. I'm very, very happy. The two projects that you reviewed at the last meeting, there was a rezone for industrial at Palm Valley Crossing that was approved by council as recommended by the Planning and Zoning Commission. And then there was the zoning ordinance text amendment for use permits for churches to make those a permitted use, if you remember. And that was also approved by council as recommended by the Planning and Zoning Commission. And then we were chatting just before the meeting. I think you all saw the news that Buc-ee's completed their land deal. So that's very exciting. And again, we didn't have all of that information finalized when the zoning came forward, but now it appears that they are coming to Goodyear, so that is exciting news. That is all the communicate. Oh, and there was a question on where we are with the Planning Commission vacancy, and I don't have an update for you on that at the moment, so I will hopefully have something to share next month, but I will share information as soon as I learn it. That's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, that being said, the next Planning and Zoning Commission meeting will be on April 17th, 2024, 6 p.m. in this building. If there are no further discussions or business, this meeting is adjourned.